That should be us. GM. You can hear me? I'm streaming. There is sound. There we go. GM. GM. All right. SK was the first GM today. Congratulations, SK. GM. Cold filtered water. Tiger White, correct. Correct. Cold filtered water. Very good. Very, very good. So, all right. Let's get going. So, today, I'm going to go back to the old format of live lessons. So, as we go through this, I'm going to be very particular about this. If you want to ask a question about one minute. Okay. So, if you want to ask a question, put it in AMA questions. And as I go through the lesson, I will not look at the chat, so I will not take any questions. But after, I want to use your questions about trade management that may come up during the lesson and add them to the lesson. So if you ask good questions, they will get edited into the final cut. So we'll cover everything about trade management here. All right? Very good. So, I'll get ready and get started without further ado. So remember, AMA questions is the channel inside the real world to ask your questions. If you ask it in the YouTube chat, it will not be included in the lesson. Just to repeat that, questions only in AMA questions. If you ask anywhere else, it will not be included. And let's get going, because I've got a second session at the gym to get to. So, chats are off for now. Use AMA questions only. I'll get going on the lesson. Just make sure I've got it set up right. Okay, perfect. So this lesson is going to cover trade management. What to do when you are actually in a trade. The first thing I'll say is that you should do a lot less than you think, and you should probably do a lot less than you currently are when you're in a trade. The perfect trade is one where you have to do nothing. Yes? If we think of an ideal trade, you enter with your full size at your correct area whenever your system gives you confirmation, and price runs all the way to your take profit that you had predefined and set, and you get a winner. Now, of course, that's an ideal world, but what happens in the day-to-day life of trading when things don't quite go as planned? There are instances where it is okay to alter trades and both adding to winning trades and cutting losers. There are scenarios where that can be valid. But I'll preface this first by saying that if you're a new trader, and by new trader I mean anyone who is within their first 6 months of proper trading. So I don't care if you've got 10 years of experience. If you're in your first 6 months of proper trading, by proper trading I mean following the lessons about backtesting, then moving on to your dollar or low risk trading and your data collection phase, where you're trading with discipline, you're trading exactly to a plan, and you're following and being professional. So if you're in that phase, then you should just strictly enter, have an invalidation, and exit your trades. Do not add complexity before you have learned the basics. So if you've taken less than 100 live trades, this lesson is probably too soon for you, and that's totally fine. It's worth watching, I'm sure, if you want to get an idea of what's to come, but your focus should absolutely be elsewhere. Why do I say that now at the beginning? Because you do not want to add complexity to a system that you don't even know yet, right? If you don't understand how a system works by taking full trades, you are not yet ready to take partial trades. You're not yet ready to move profit targets. You are not yet ready to scale in or scale out, pyramiding, or any of the things we're going to talk about here. That is totally fine. And in fact, it is better for you to not think about these things. Think of it as a process. You begin with very mechanical, repetitive, precise trading, entries, exits, and stop losses. You only have 3 things to worry about, right? As a new trader: your entry, your stop loss, and your exit. Once you move on to more advanced trading, you have multiple extra variables that can improve you as a trader, but only at the right time. So I really want to stress that. Now, for everybody else that has experience and is now looking to size up or move on to more complex trading because they have completed hundreds of trades and they know how to trade mechanically, they know how to trade exactly to their system rules, we'll talk a little bit about trade management. Trade management itself, it's very important to not make it discretionary. All right? This is the biggest mistake. You do not want to be discretionary with your trade management, meaning you don't want to enter more of a trade, so add size. You don't want to cut size. You don't want to move a stop loss. You don't want to move a take profit. You don't want to do any of those things that we're going to talk about. You do not want to do any of those because you feel like it or think this is going to happen or the chart is telling you something. That's not valid. Every single alteration to your trade that you could make should be planned beforehand. So number 1 in trade management is proper planning. You must have multiple paths for your trade before you enter. So yes, what you're about to realize is that almost everything to do with trade management in a trade is actually set beforehand. So you do not wait until you're in a trade to plan your trade management. So you must visualize and chart out multiple paths. Your ideal path, number 1, where you think price will go if you're correct. Great, yes. Also, at least 2 more paths. 1, that if your trade is just wrong from the moment you enter, what path would it take? And another, what would it mean if your trade was right at the beginning and then ended up wrong? So at least 3 paths. You can do more if you want, but it must have at least 3 paths. Just by doing this before your trade, it will help you and force you to think about other opportunities, other potential, either on the good side or on the bad side. You might think of a better trade to take by sketching out multiple paths. And of course, you might see several scenarios where your trade could go wrong, many of which actually have a high probability, and you might avoid taking the trade altogether. But let's imagine you did take the trade, since we're in the trade management lesson. You must then have a clearly written plan before you enter the trade. 99% of trade success is in the planning. I am not exaggerating this. You have to know before you get into the trade which different paths it can take, what would constitute a good trade, average trade, and a bad trade. What would constitute your invalidation at the beginning? What would be a valid place to move your stop loss to say this is going higher? What would be a valid place, if any, to cut your trade early, which is very, very rare, as you're about to see. So 99% is the planning. Keep that in mind because it's going to make a lot of sense when I go onto the chart. And of course, as part of your proper planning, you must start with the stop. Too many people get it the wrong way around. They enter the trade or they plan their trade only thinking about the green numbers. The dollar signs are blinding them. They're looking at their profit only. Wrong. Start with the question, where am I wrong? If you start with that question, you will do well as a trader. You must consider the downside first. Only then can you look at upside targets. So find, first of all, whatever reason you're entering, find where that would be wrong, and that is your initial stop. Right? So after you have done all this, after you have planned, you then go into execution. The most important thing to remember is every single time you click that button, long or short, increases the risk. More executions means more trades. More trades means more risk. If I enter a long on Bitcoin and I go in full size, so I buy 100% of what my position would be, so say I'm going to risk 2% of my portfolio, and I go long on Bitcoin with 2% risk in one order, I set my stop loss, I set my take profit. Then you come along and you enter 25%, then you wait for confirmation, you add another 25%, you wait for more confirmation, you add another 25, and finally another 25. So in total, over an extended period, you enter your full 100% of position, 2% of risk, but in 4 trades. Then your trade goes all the way up to the target, and so does mine. We take the same hypothetical trade, but I do it in 1 chunk, you do it in 4. You might look at that, and your stats and your journal and your trade log might tell you that that was 1 trade, but that was 4 trades. If you want to know the difference, and if you want to know whether you are executing efficiently, don't look at your order history. Right? Don't look at your order history on your exchange. That will show you your P&L for each trade individually as it's finished, right? Go to your trade history. If you go to your trade history on whichever exchange you use, you will see every single execution that you made throughout every single trade. You might think you've taken 100 trades, but if you look at your trade history, you could have 400, 500, or 600 trades. 500, 600 executions. Your first goal should be to cut that number down. More executions equals more trades equals more risk. If your plan is correct, the executions should be minimal. Think about this. Back to our ideal scenario. If you plan your trade perfectly, in this hypothetical world, if you plan it perfectly, you should only need to enter once. This is in essence what scalping is. Now, this video is not about scalping. This is for anyone. But as a scalper, if I can sum scalping up in 1 sentence, it is a momentum trade where you are right immediately. Okay? Scalping is not about waiting for price to come to your level and then entering and then waiting for it to move or waiting for a pullback and then entering. Scalping is timing the impulse up or down, timing it, getting in, and it continuing in that direction. So essentially, in a perfect scalp, you are not offside for even 1 second. That's the nature of scalping. It has to be that way because you're trying to only hold a position for a few minutes, right? So if you take that same principle and apply it to any trade style, day trading, swing trading, position trading, the core principle of that is the same. I'm not saying that when you enter, price won't go towards your stop loss at all. Of course it will. That's normal. But your planning should be based around, when can I enter this? When is my best possible entry for this particular trade I'm setting up? Too many people, even on a day trade, swing trade, position trade, too many people get their setup, they plan a trade, and then they rush to enter because price is roughly in the zone that they would want to be in, and they want to get in case it moves. In case it moves. I don't want to miss the move, yeah? And even if your trade ends up winning, you've done so with the wrong mindset. So think more like a scalper about how you can time your position. It's not about having zero drawdown, as I said, but if your plan is correct, you should only have to execute once or maybe twice. So let's look at a chart and explain it in detail with an example. So it all comes down to planning, like I said. So in planning, very simply, you want to make the plan exactly why you're entering. First, what is the trade? So in this hypothetical scenario, I'm waiting for price to follow the green line if it's my perfect setup, yeah? As you would expect. Green line, price would go up, it would come down, and where you see the position tool start is where the trade would start. So you do not enter on any of this. You're waiting for it to break the down trend line. You're waiting then for, ideally, a pullback to retest the trend line. And then the breakout of that high that was set, the breakout of that high will be your entry point. Your stop loss will be below the trend line, and ideally below whichever low was set. You're planning this, remember. It's not going to look the exact same when it happens, but that's the nature of real live trading. Don't plan trades on a chart with history. Plan trades live in the moment like you would plan a real trade.